What happens when one man tries to watch all the horror films of the 1980s? Well, we're about to find out because I'm your host, Josh Spiegel, and this is the 80s Project. All right, here we go. We are jumping straight into 1985. We are halfway through the decade now, and 85 begins the back half of things, and things are about to get a little bit weirder and fuller, and lots more direct-to-video releases coming out. So let's dive right in and check out what 1985 has to offer. We're starting out with a film that's listed as coming out on January 1st, so the year is starting off right, and it's a much smaller scale kickoff with Screambook 2, the next issue. It begins in the video store and is shot on a home-grade camcorder with a weird clown clerk who is having a great time with her job.
This'll make you scream with glory!
And it's an anthology, so our first segment is called Till Death Do Us Part. It has a snobby family, although it's a little hard to tell what they're arguing about because of the sound quality here. But the mother starts to tell a story, so now we're having a flashback within a story that's from a comic book that a clown clerk gave the girls. A woman wearing a Mrs. Lovett's meat pies apron kills her husband, and then a famous actress is inheriting millions since they believed someone else murdered them. But after she goes home to bask in her crimes, she's visited by remnants of her past. And get ready to hear this lady scream, like, a lot. And this one is basically a cross between Creepshow's Something to Tide You Over and Father's Day, right down to the ending. The second segment is called Silver Sweets, and some women who are at a funeral for a friend who died of lung cancer because she smoked her brains out.
She smoked and smoked her brains out.
But one of them has a husband who's a part of the military, and he's pretty awful to her, and she stays home to watch some dancers. But it seems like they have something in the basement named Silver Sweets. It attacks her, and it's got a big furry arm, and it seems like this is a tribute to the crate segment of Creepshow. The next story is called Birthday Wishes, and this kid named Michael meets a magician in front of a sheet on the wall, and he asks for revenge on his family. At his birthday, he makes a wish with nightmarish results as Grandma makes sure that we know who everyone is.
That was my son! That was my husband!
The fourth and final story is called A Grave Matter and has a reporter that's doing a story about small-town murders, ones that lead directly back to a nearby funeral home. And you may have noticed this, but this is a homemade movie, and it's a sequel to a film that I covered from the year before. Just like that one, this is written and directed by Joe Zazzo, the horror himbo. He was just a teenager at the time, and again, most of the cast here are also teens, and definitely no one is an actor. It dumps the comic book style transitions from the first one, which is a bummer, but you can see a jump up in filmmaking ability between the two. Again, this didn't really get much in the way of a release, and certainly didn't make waves in the horror community at the time, but it's a fun window into the advent of backyard filmmaking at the dawn of the SOV revolution.
I'm not ready! I'm not ready!
And this is better than the first, but maybe a little less charming, but it's still a 2.5. It's rough around the edges and hard to rate as an actual movie, but it's still fun to watch as a time capsule of the era. I really dig this kind of charming stuff. I don't think it's very good, but it is still fun to watch. The horror cultural significance is just a 1 though, since it's not much known, doesn't feature any horror mainstays, and doesn't impact the genre. Should you watch it? Not if you're not into homemade horror, but if you are, it's a good time.
Say, do you have anything that'll really make me scream?
We're staying on the low end of things because that SOV world was in full bloom, and on January 10th, we get the return of someone I covered not that long ago with Twisted Illusions. Again, we're shot on home video, and this guy is talking about a horror film producer who's in a private clinic, and he's hoping to get him to finance a project that they're working on. And this guy is Joel Wynkoop, who is just in a huge list of horror projects and is still active, and this was one of his very first appearances. They get turned away by the secretary, but sneak in to see the producer, and this other guy says his name is Tim Ritter, and they want to make a movie called Day of the Reaper, and I'll get more into that a bit later. It turns out that Mr. Maxwell died 2 hours ago, and I just love that the hospital has him done up like a mummy with sunglasses on. It's an anthology as well, and the first segment is called The Capricorn Network. And then there's this guy who's a penny pincher and has some sort of accent I can't place, but it's hilarious.
I'm positive. Don't forget to keep the bill now. We gotta keep a record of our monthly spending. You know, we had $2.03 off last month.
His wife is frustrated with him, but he gets very excited when he's able to hack into a cable channel and watch it for free. However, the president of the company starts talking to him directly through the TV and takes action for the theft. The next story is called Mind the Stairs, and it has these two guys, and one is very concerned about the other's poor health habits, although maybe he should be making more sure of where he's walking. The next one is called The Cleanup Job, and it features a frazzled new mother and her flustered, jerky husband, and they fight. But soon, her vacuuming while the baby's in the middle of the room leads to dark results. And, well, I mean, there's 7 stories in total, and this is the next work from Tim Ritter, whose film Day of the Reaper I covered in the 1984 episodes of the project. Tim was a really early adopter of the shot-on-video world, and at this point was still making his way up with these backyard projects. Much like the Screambook, this was a tribute to Creepshow, but also a bit of Twilight Zone. Since the film is only an hour and a half and there's 7 stories, they all move pretty quickly, and some work better than others. But there's a segment in here that's gonna look pretty familiar, because it's called Truth or Dare, and it served as a precursor to a full-length feature film, which we'll cover when we get to the films of 1986. Also, there was a sequel to this, made in 2004, almost 20 years later, called Twisted Illusions 2. And I do enjoy the homegrown nature here, so I'll go with a 2.5, as I don't like it as much as Day of the Reaper, but it is still a fun watch. It's definitely not polished or professional, but it's still silly goodness. The HCS is just a 1 though, since it's just not that widely seen or talked about and isn't one of the more noted of Ritter's career. Should you watch it? Maybe. If you enjoy your horror with a heaping gob of ingenuity, maybe, but if you like more of a standard film, probably not.
You dare me what?
Take your eye out.
Take my eye out? What are you, crazy?
This next one is going to be strange, and I know this whole block has been strange so far, but now we head to January 12th in South Korea, just in time for the War of the God Monsters. It starts with a young couple enjoying their time in a lake, but they get sucked under by something. We then meet Kang, and she's a reporter assigned to go talk to Dr. Kim, who has wild theories about dinosaurs returning. So she finds the doctor's house, and right as she does, his new housekeeper arrives, so she tells her that the position has been filled and then takes her place, but puts this fake mole on her face, which is hilarious because the doc has never seen the housekeeper, so would have no idea that she had a mole in the first place. The doc has a daughter, and meanwhile, this big bird thing touches down to feed on some energy. Dr. Kim is obsessed with going out and trying to prove his theory, although he's mocked, and he tends to leave his daughter hanging. But then, Kang reveals her true intentions to the doc, so he kicks her out, only to let her back in again when some guy tries to attack her. Turns out that whole thing was just a ruse though, but things turn sour when the actual housekeeper comes back for the job, and they butt heads. It gets worse when little Sohee discovers a giant egg and Mama doesn't like what she finds, and you occasionally get glimpses of these other creatures creating havoc and they may look familiar. You have an assortment that includes this bat thing, and soon the Doc and Kang have to team up to try to help the world survive the attacks from all of these giant monsters. And this one's weird because it's sort of a clip show. It was by Jung Young Kim, and he only directed the human stuff with Dr. Kim and his drama. All of the monster footage already existed and was edited in from several different TV shows, mostly Ultraman, but also a 1973 series called Fireman. It didn't get an American release around the time and was then thought lost for quite a while, only recently being rediscovered, restored, and released. And it's fine. It's a 2.5, which is becoming a theme for this block, and I hope not for this whole year. But honestly, I'd rather watch the Ultraman episodes, but it's still a little fun, especially that Bat guy. Paystar's awesome. The significance is just a 1 though, since it was never really released here, was lost for decades, and most of what's notable comes from other sources. Should you watch it? Only if you're a kaiju completist, I suppose. Let's get to this next one here, which doesn't have a fixed release date and was just said to have come out in 1985, and it's The Strangeness. We have this couple hiking and they discover this cave and go right in, and Brian becomes convinced he hears a sound and starts to go towards it, although Amy's freaked out. And she should be, because there's something in there and it attacks and kills them. We then meet a group headed up to that old mine called the Golden Spike, and they're trying to do research to find out what happened to have it be closed down. They encounter a local who tells them that the mine is on native ground, and they spread a story of a creature that lived underground and ate anyone that came around, although we know that it's likely not just a tall tale. After what seems like a really long time lollygagging, they eventually reach the cave and go down in. Things immediately get creepy when a rope breaks, seemingly cut. But then we get our first glimpse of what's down there and some adorable stop-motion tentacles. So, thank goodness this isn't Yorotsuki Doji or something, or else this video would be a much more limited audience. But then they wander around the caves for a while, telling jokes to each other and facing some jealousy stuff. But the attacks finally begin, and it causes a cave-in. They realize they're stuck and have to try to find another way out, encountering eaten-up skeletons along the way. And they're gonna have to get out without getting munched on. And this is obviously a very low-budget picture, and according to IMDb, was only around 25 grand. It was by Melanie Ann Phillips and was one of only 2 films that she directed, but then mostly left the film industry to pursue writing. So, for a portion of the film, it's pretty obvious that they're not in caves, and the rocks on the wall look more like paper, which they kinda were, since they were tinfoil that was painted black. The opening scene is said to have been shot in a real cave though, and they didn't go in that far, which is lucky, because a month later, some miners went deeper to see if the mine was worth reopening and died from exposure to a poison gas. It may take a while for them to show it off, but that stop-motion creature, nicknamed Binky, steals the show and has a Lovecraftian edge to it. It didn't get much in the way of a release though, and again, has formed a small following in recent years, but still remains on the edges of the niche. And this is gonna sound familiar, but it's a 2.5. It starts strong and ends great, but there's way too much filler in the middle that feels like killing time until we get to the creature stuff. The John Carpenter knockoff score is cool though, and Binky steals the show. The significance is just a 1, since it doesn't get talked about at all and still just sort of sinks into the land of the obscure. Should you watch it? Perhaps. I think that the final 20 minutes are really worth it and a lot of fun, but it's just not as enjoyable to get there. This is our other one on the block with an unknown date, because I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of those in the 85. But this came out in the UK sometime in 85, and it's Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire, otherwise known as Billy and the Vampire. It involves a game of snooker, which is a game very similar to pool, and the green baize of the title is the fabric covering the table. But this isn't just about the game of snooker. It's a musical.
Green stamps, green stamps.
Phil Daniels is here as Billy, and his manager is named T.O., and he's also a replacement warlock. But then there's also a loan shark with devious methods. And then, of course, as the title promised, a vampire. He's a celebrity snooker player, but he's also the head of the thieves from Krull. He's asked about Billy Kid and told that he could win the world title, and the pair have a bitter rivalry and basically throw insults at each other through the press. Seems T.O. owes the loan shark a bunch of money and is trying to manipulate the two into having a match that'll make them a bunch of money. But then he throws a monkey wrench into things when he declares that the loser of the match has to quit the game entirely. They eventually get to the big match, and things seem to go rather poorly for Billy, so of course he has to sing about it. So is his career done? And what's a vampire got to do with this anyway? And this is a weird one because it's sort of based on real events. I mean, not a real vampire, of course. The director was Alan Clark, and I just talked about him over on the Sci-Fi Project with a film called Stars of the Roller State Disco, and the majority of his work was for the TV box. Now, in real life, there was a popular snooker champ named Ray Reardon, and because of his hairstyle, people often called him Dracula, and he leaned into that and would sometimes dress up. He had a real rivalry with a much younger player named Jimmy White, but this film took a much more fanciful approach to it. Both Reardon and White would cameo in the film as other characters, of course. The budget is listed as being a little less than £3 million and got some strong reviews, but didn't seem to earn a fair amount in ticket sales and developed a cult following in the UK, although it never really made its name in the US, mainly due to the lack of knowledge of the sport and the players. And this is interesting. I'm giving this a 3.5 because I was sucked into this a little more than I was expecting to be. And I have to give props to the film for making me this damn involved with a snooker match. Plus, the songs are actually pretty damn catchy. The HCS is just a 1 though, because outside of the vampire element, which is minor, there's no horror here, and it's also super obscure. Should you watch it? If you're looking for a horror fix, then no. But if you're in the mood for an odd musical comedy about a sport you normally don't care for, then go for it.
I have a supernatural vocation for this game.
This is probably the biggest one on the block, and it could have gone in the 84 episodes since it had a screening in November of 84 in Las Vegas. But it was given a regular release on January 18th of 85, and it's Ghoulies. It begins with an occult ritual where a baby is going to be sacrificed, but its mother steps in, and so does a man with an eraser for a head, and they save the child thanks to a protective talisman on its neck. The mother is then killed with the help of some little creatures, but it then jumps ahead 25 years, and we meet Jonathan, that baby now grown up, and he and his girlfriend are visiting the estate that he's just inherited. Wolfgang is here, and after they check it all out, Jonathan finds the cellar where there's an assortment of black magic stuff, including a cloak and a book. They decide to have a housewarming party with their friends, including Chad Copeland, the guy who stole Pee-wee's bike, and Detective Olivia Benson. And you know, when it's a party, sometimes you just have to dance. Later, Jonathan gets the idea to have a ritual like he sees in the book, and it seems like it didn't work. But then after they leave, one of the creatures from the intro appears. Later, he starts to get obsessed with the magic, making a talisman for Rebecca, quitting school, and then dressing up in that robe and calling up those creatures. And they're called the Ghoulies. There's the fish guy, cat, and rat, And they're the key three, but they're not the only things in this film, as we'll soon see, because he then calls up Grizzle and Greedagut, two demon creatures that will serve him, as he's clearly been taken over by his father's evil. And it's hilarious to me that his eyes are turned green by the possession, but I guess they didn't have the contacts lined up, so they're just always looking in two different directions. They have everyone over again, and he takes everyone over and completes the ritual which revives Malcolm in zombie form, which kicks off the insanity, which involves a really disturbing clown puppet that does this. And a temptress with a really long tongue. And I want to point out that Dick is the only one that he does this to. He takes on the form of a beautiful woman to make out with in order to kill him. But let's face it, Malcolm just wanted an excuse to tongue Dick. Wait. So this is co-written and directed by Luca Bercovici, and this was his directorial debut, but we've already seen him on the project as an actor in Parasite and Frightmare. And what's interesting is that this is often called a ripoff of Gremlins, since it came out afterwards, but it was actually being worked on back in '83 as Beasties, and was even in production at the same time as Joe Dante's film. But they ran out of funds halfway through shooting and had to stop for several months to find additional financing, which gave Gremlins the leeway to get released first. In the end, it cost around $5 million to make, and even though the reviews weren't great and it was called a knockoff, the film's poster, featuring the fish ghoulie popping out of a toilet, was too big of a draw and helped it gain a sizable audience, and it earned around $35 million in ticket sales. It was enough to kick off a small franchise, and 3 sequels would follow, with the second entry arriving just 2 years later, dropping most of the magic elements and focusing solely on the little creatures themselves. And I get a kick out of this one, even if I can agree that it's not all that great, so I'll go with 3.5 on it. It's just a lot of fun. It's a weird mishmash of stuff. The HCS is a 4 since it's pretty well known and started a whole series and is probably the most seen Gremlins clone, but it's still sitting on the fringes of horror and isn't one of the more mainstream. And even though I think everyone knows that poster, not everyone has actually seen the film. Should you watch it? Yep, you can try to avoid it, but it'll get you in the end. We're going through this month step by step, and this next one sort of dances around the concept of horror, and on January 18th, the same day as Ghoulies, we met the new kids. We meet Aunt Becky and her brother, and their dad is just one of the coolest sons of bitches on the planet. He's in the military, and sadly, he and his wife die, leaving Abby and Lauren on their own, so they're sent off to live with their aunt and uncle in a much smaller town. They're renovating an old amusement park and live on a big farm, and they have to go to a new school where Rocky Dennis is also a student. But Robert California goes there too, and he's the leader of a group of thugs that give the new kids a hard time. And one of them is Chuck. And Chuck, I never did like you. Him and Dutra make a bet to see who can seduce Abby first, and they both put forth a really aggressive effort to say, hey, be my girl, but her disinterest only angers them. Step by step, they increase their bullying by trashing the park, while Lauren starts dating the sheriff's daughter, but authorities prove to be fairly ineffective when dealing with the thugs. When they trash his uncle's car, Lauren ups the ante by breaking into Dutra's home and taking payment at knife point, which just prompts them to ramp things up with dead rabbits in the shower, brawls, a montage. Until the crew eventually kidnapped Abby from the school dance with the intentions of assaulting her, and then a big violent face-off at the park. Now, for the most part, this one leans more into the realm of thriller, but it's tagged with the horror genre mainly because it's directed by Sean S. Cunningham of Friday the 13th fame. It was given a budget of $6 million, and several of the actors featured here weren't known yet, particularly Spader, as he only had a handful of smaller gigs before this. It would just be around a year or so before he would start getting media roles and make a name for himself. Laughlin had already appeared in Amityville 3D here in the project, but what's interesting is that Shannon Presby, who plays Lauren here, decided that he wasn't really enjoying acting anymore, and after this only did voice work and became a criminal prosecutor. The reviews were pretty rough, and it only got a limited release, opening in 100 theaters. However, its average screen earnings were low, and it only raked in around $200,000 on its opening weekend, quickly vanishing after that. And this is decent but standard, so it's a 3. I enjoyed it, but it's not really giving me much that I haven't seen before, and it's not giving it to me in a way that's unique. The HCS is just a 2 since it disappeared quick and left no impact on the horror world, but since it was a kickstart for Spader and his tiny blue briefs and had Cunningham involved, it gets the 2. Should you watch it? Yeah, hang tough with it.
This is for the car. Will you even hear me?
We're going to end this block in a buggy kind of way as we travel over to Italy for January 31st and go back into Argento land with Phenomena. It starts with a young tourist getting left behind by her tour bus, and she tries to find help in a nearby cottage, but there's something else there. Something that bursts free from chains and attacks her, killing her with scissors. But then, Dr. Loomis is here, and he's an entomologist with a pet chimp, and he's talking to a couple of inspectors, and one of them is Michel Suavi, most known as the Masked Man from Demons, and also the director of Cemetery Man and Stage Fright. It's been 8 months since the opening, which they're able to determine by the amount of flies and maggots on it, and note that there's been several bodies, the work of a killer. Next, we meet Betty Ross 1.0, and she's in Switzerland for the first time to attend a new school, chaperoned by a woman named Bruckner. Jennifer has an affinity for insects, and she settles in while another girl is stalked by the killer to the accompaniment of an Iron Maiden tune that is great, but just doesn't match up with the scene. But Jennifer also sleepwalks and witnesses the murder, but also encounters Inga the chimp, who takes her to the dock. And it's overseen by some ladybugs, and I love that we see their POV, and then they're like talking to each other and probably making fun of her outfit or something, because ladybugs are petty like that. And the killings continue, and she forms a bond with McGregor, but is taunted by her fellow classmates, leading to her having to show off her buggy abilities. And then it's up to Jenny and her little buzzing friends to try to solve the mystery. And this is the third appearance by master horror director Dario Argento, after covering Inferno in '80 and Tenebrae in '82. He was inspired by stories of actual investigators using insects to assist with CSI information and built the film around that. It was one of the earliest roles for Jennifer Connelly and served as her first lead role, and in the film, she's meant to be the daughter of a famous actor named Paul Corvino, and Argento wrote him to be Al Pacino and intended to use his name and likeness in the film. However, Pacino said no to that, so they came up with a fake name instead. Connelly also didn't make it through the filming intact. The chimp used in the film bit her during one shot, removing a part of her finger, so she had to be rushed to the hospital to have it reattached. After that, the little guy hated her so much that they had to use a stand-in for several scenes in which they'd interact. It did really well on release, outgrossing films in Italy like Doom, Gremlins, and The Terminator, and was given a US distribution through New Line later in '85, but the title was changed to Creepers and was chopped down by around a half hour. It's not listed how much it earned over here, but it developed a nice-sized cult following and would receive a spiritual successor in 1995 with the video game The Clock Tower. It's not an actual sequel, but drew a good amount of inspiration from the look and feel, and the main character looks like Jennifer Connelly and is also named Jennifer. And Phenomena is pretty solid, but not my favorite Argento flick, so I'll go with 3.5 with it. The story is just a little too all over the place, and I'm used to Dario making good music choices with Goblin, and I love me some Maiden, but wow, do the songs clash with what's on screen and sap the mood out of it. The HCS is a 3 since it's pretty well known and by one of the legends of the industry, but it's not a mainstream film that's widely known and didn't impact the culture in a meaningful way. Should you watch it? Yes, fly out and do it.
We worship you! We worship you! We worship you! We worship you!
I love you. I love you all.
So there you have it, 1985 begins, and there's some interesting stuff in this block, but I think my favorite of them is probably Ghoulies. I have a real soft spot for that one. It has a lot of puppets in it, and I like puppets. Phenomena, also a pretty good one up there, but I think Ghoulies is more fun and edges it out for me. But let me know which is your favorite down below in the comments. Which of these have you seen? Which of these would you now like to see? Tell me that all there down below in the comments. Also, if you like this video, hit that like button. If you like what you see on the channel, subscribe to it and hit the bell to get notified when new videos go up. And check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines, where you can help support this channel. And you can also go to movietimelines.org and you can actually purchase one of the 80s Project books. Check that out right here. And also come on back, because we're going right into 1985 and we're going to get through this year right here on the 80s Project.